Hello boys and girls, today we are going to make our own Advent wreath. Now for this you're going to need something cylindrical like maybe a paper towel roll or even toilet paper roll or even paper cups. You should definitely have either crayons or colored pencils, and you might also want to have a couple of markers or two, just because those will help with coloring onto the craft rolls, like no matter what you have. If you don't have markers but maybe you have paint, then you could use paint as well. You could use something different than, paper towel or toilet paper rolls. Like I said, you could use paper cups. You could even get a little creative and use tissue paper box, whatever you feel you can use. So it's very open-ended. Masika just happens to have these on hand. So as I said, today we are going to make an Advent wreath, especially since we are coming up on the season of Advent. So in Advent, remember, we have at least 5 candles. We have the wreath, the circle of the wreath in the green. So if we remember the candles, we have at least 5. We have the first candle, which is the prophecy candle. We have the second candle, which is the Bethlehem candle. The third candle, which is going to be a different color than the other 4, and that's a pink candle. That's the shepherd candle. The fourth candle is the angel candle, and the last candle, which is white, is the Christ candle. So what we're going to start off with is making our candles. And so I'm going to start off with the craft rolls, and this is where you want markers, because markers are going to be better for coloring in on craft rolls, toilet paper rolls, whatever. That's what's gonna work better. So I'm gonna use this Sharpie, and I'm gonna color all over on at least 1.5 of these craft craft toilet paper rolls. So now I have my purple candles, and one side of one of the purple candles is not colored. And this is going to become my pink candle, which is lit on week 3. So I'm going to make sure that I color this whole side pink. So now I have my purple candle, which I will end up cutting in half a little later. I also have my other purple candle. I also have the pink candle, and I'm gonna end up having this candle, and I'm gonna kind of keep it this brown color because I don't really have anything white to go over it. Now, if you have white paint, or maybe even a white crayon, or a white colored pencil, those might work on this. But if you don't have anything, don't worry about it. It's not gonna be a big deal. Masika actually might have a white crayon. If she does, then she would color this whole thing white. But I'm not gonna worry about that so much right now. I'm gonna set this to the side, and what I'm gonna look at right now is how to do the wreath part of our Advent wreath. And I'm gonna actually start out by doing just a circle in pencil. And this is to kind of give me a guide as to where my wreath is. Now I'm starting out kind of lightly, and you can use something to help you draw your circle. Like if you have a water bottle at home, if you have an empty jar or an empty can at home, you can use those to help you draw your circle. I wouldn't recommend using something this small because that's not going to work very well, but you want like a medium-sized circle that almost fills up the whole page, but not quite. So we have our wreath here, and the wreath, as we remember, is the circle of the wreath reminds us of God himself, his eternity, his endless mercy, which has no end or beginning. And the fact that it's something that's green speaks of hope that we have in God, a hope of renewal, of newness, of eternal life. So as many of you have probably ever seen, the Advent wreath is always green. Now it might have pine branches, it might have ivy. So we're gonna actually do something simple, and we're gonna do a little bit of both. So when we do ivy kind of has like little pointy ends. So I'm actually gonna find my line right here, and I'm going to do some curve lines. So I'm going to curve out, and then I'm going to curve down, and then I'm going to curve in until I hit the middle line again. I'm going to do the same thing on the outside. I'm going to curve out, curve a little down, and then curve in until I hit that middle line. And that's actually pretty much how a piece of ivy might look. So I'm going to kind of do that almost all the way. I'm going to do that pretty much all the way around, just to start off my wreath. So here we have our wreath, and it's ready to get colored, and this is where you can color with markers, you can color with colored pencils, you can pretty much color with anything. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to color with colored pencils because I have two different colors of green right here, and I think that will work very nicely. If you have something else, you're totally welcome to color with those. But I'm going to start with just coloring in my ivy with the lighter green of the two. So I'm going to start with coloring in the ivy all the way around, just so that way I can get a nice good sense. And then I'm going to add in the sort of pine branches. With my ivy all colored in, now I'm going to do some pine branches, and I'm really just kind of going to do some lines that kind of go out and then go a little sideways, like on an angle. Because pine branches, like pines have like those little pine needles. And I want to make sure I get like a little bit, but I don't want it to overpower the ivy. So I'm just kind of going where each ivy piece meets, and I'm kind of just drawing a line and doing little quick diagonal lines, just like that, to help me make my pine branches. So now I have my wreath all ready to go. I have my candles. I did color one side of my craft tube here with white, but I did leave the other side blank just in case there were some of us that don't have white. But I have to make sure that I'm cutting these down a bit. So before I even cut these in half, I'm gonna cut these down a little bit, maybe even just cut them in half. So I'm gonna make sure I'm cutting these as close to halfway as possible, which might squish them a little bit, but that's okay, because if you notice, we don't have a lot of room on our paper, and since we don't have a lot of room, we want to make sure that all the candles can be put on here and that there's enough room that you could potentially like light the candles. You know, for each Sunday in Advent, you could light them up, like maybe draw a little flame on them if you wanted to. So it might even have to be like even less than half. So that's actually still pretty big. So it might even have to be less than that. But we could also trim down the edges themselves once we get these as close to the size as we want. So actually, speaking of which, I'm going to start with my candle that has both purple and pink on it, because this is at least the third week, and you know, the other candle could be the fourth week, or it could be the first week, or it could be the second week. The third week is always the different color, aside from the Christmas Eve, which is the Christ candle. So I'm actually going to trim these down even further. So because I cut these in half already, I can even just, that looks pretty good. If I do that, and then I can do the same thing for this guy, I can trim him down. It's actually easier to trim them down once you've cut them in half. And I'm not gluing these down yet, by the way. If you don't have glue, you can use tape. If you need to use something different, that's perfectly fine. So I'm noticing actually I probably didn't even need 2 whole craft rolls for this. I probably could have just used 1.5, but it's okay. Save the extra pieces, because you never know, maybe you might want to do some fun little craft with these at a later point. You can always reuse them, so just save them. Even if you don't use it right now, it's always good to have the extra, and especially in case if you mess up on something, you have the extra right there for backup, just in case. It's always good to have backups. So as you can see, as I'm going around, I'm kind of like placing where I want the candles. I'm not putting them down just yet, but I am kind of trimming them down so that way I can see the placement of them, because that will help me figure out if they're the right size or if I need to make them smaller. I can't make them bigger necessarily. So as I finish this up, I realized that these are pretty good sizes. There's enough room that if I wanted to, I could easily draw like little flames on top of each of them for when we get to each week. And so that leaves me with room in the middle to do the Christ candle right in the middle. And so with this, I'm actually just going to take this, I'm not even going to go halfway, I'm going to go like a third of the way. I'm doing really small for this guy because I don't need, because it's going to be in the center of the wreath. So there's not a lot of room that I can work with here. Because I want to make sure that I can still do the flame up top. And so once I finish with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue down the edges very carefully. Now as you glue, if you don't have glue, you can use tape, and tape, what you would do is you would just tape down on the sides. So I'm just putting a little glue on the edges here, and I'm gonna push it down or gently place it in the middle for this guy, because that's where that candle's gonna go. And now I'm gonna do the same thing for the other 4, where I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the edges, just like this. And if it drips down to the marker or whatever you use to color it, it's okay. Just don't like overdo it with the glue if you're using glue. If you're using tape, it's a different story. Tape obviously is not going to, ruin anything so much, but you still want to just be careful with how much tape you use, because you don't want the whole thing to be covered with tape. Whoop. And as I finish up, remember, for each week of Advent, I will be able to kind of light each of these candles, and I could do that with crayon, I could do that with marker, I could do that with colored pencil. It's all up to you. I could even have moved these out a little bit towards the corners if I wanted to, but I wanted to try and make these look like they were on the wreath. So here is our lovely little Advent wreath with our purple, pink, and white candle. So I hope everyone had fun with this particular project. I hope everyone is enjoying their wonderful time at home. I hope everyone's staying safe. And I can't wait to see pictures of these boys and girls. Have a lovely day.